We are 2 days away from a vote where we could either Brexit or we could remain. And we, like other institutions or groups, have actually prepared plans for either circumstance. One of those set of plans is fun and exciting and positive and forward-looking, and the other is Brexit. So let's talk about Brexit first. What we would actually do if we were to Brexit, what we would practically immediately do, and then let's talk about the other plan, what the actual opportunities, exciting opportunities are for us if we remain. So first of all, Brexit. We would need to move fast because of the uncertainty. The uncertainty revolves around our place in the science programme, our relationship with the single market, and our relationship with freedom of movement and staffing and being able to hire people. And because uncertainty means that you can't plan on anything, it tends to go with disinvestment and people pulling out. So on the science programme, we've got a risk that consortia being formed would not include the UK just because they don't know what's going to happen coming further down the line. There have been some instances of this already. Certainly we would expect a lot more instantly because that's what Switzerland had when they broke with the science programme. So we would need to try and guarantee our place on the science programme. Now, this is more than just vote leave saying that that's what they would want to do, because it comes down to the balance of interests and what the remaining countries want as well. So some degree of negotiations and shoring up would have to be had. And here's the tricky thing, because there are two key elements that the remaining countries would probably demand. One is freedom of movement. So like with Norway and like with Switzerland, our access to the EU science programme has been negotiated through the single market, and they would probably, well, almost for sure, want us to continue with freedom of movement arrangement if we want to have access to the science programme at the level that we do have now. The other thing is actually our net contribution, and this has not been talked about sufficiently. The deal at the moment on the EU science programme is that everyone puts in to the pot, and then the funds are fought for competitively. Now, competitively suits the northwestern countries like our own that suck up a majority of the funding, leaving only a tiny amount for the Eastern European and Southern European countries. But we compensate for that through the net contribution, an increasing proportion of which goes into research and innovation development. So the idea that we could pull out of the EU science programme and France and Germany and the Netherlands would continue to pay net contributions and probably pay more to prop up the rest of the team and help them do well, whereas we wouldn't be paying that but still wanting to win big like the other members inside have, that would not be likely accepted. It would cause lots of problems. So you have to understand that membership of the EU science programme is not a product that you can just pick off the shelf. It's something that needs to be negotiated, and because of our size, that doesn't necessarily mean that we've got much stronger leverage in the small countries buy-in. It also means that, well, it does, but it also means that we've got much larger risks to the remaining countries if we want to mess around and not play by the same rules. So be aware that negotiations would have to be had fairly quickly to try and insulate our relationship with the science programme, at least for a short period of time, so that you don't get a massive drop-off in applications from our own labs or a drop-off in inclusions of our labs from consortia being formed as we go forward. That's just the science programme. We would see lots of problems also with small innovative businesses who are wondering whether we're going to stay with the single market or not. But then there's also all the staffing problems and problems with students in universities. There would need to be immediate moves on that for people to understand who can stay on in these entities, and if anyone's applying for jobs over here, whether it's worth them coming. So none of that sounds fun and none of that sounds positive, but all of it is critical in order to try and minimize fallout. This is why scientists aren't for Brexit because they see it as a big step back in a fast-paced world. All the advantages that we have and lowered barriers that we have at the moment would start popping back up, and there's nothing to be gained in the short term. In the long term, anything to be gained, dubious. But now let's put that aside and let's say what happens if we remain. Well, if we remain, we've got the UK presidency of the EU coming up in just about a year. We've learned from our House of Lords inquiry into EU membership and UK science that the EU is a science superpower, that we are in the driving seat, that it is delivering added value for us, and in terms of innovation and policy, the EU is actually ahead of our own government in terms of recognising the need to ramp up investment in these areas, recognising the need to link universities with small businesses. So there's tons that we should be doing. I mean, first of all, our own government has been poor at communicating to our small businesses that there's this massive pot of money that is there to help them out. Innovate UK have listed the EU grants for small businesses in a different place from their own. That should be fixed. Now, in terms of all those structural funds that go to the Eastern European and Southern European countries to help them build up capacity, that shouldn't be given directly to their mayors. It should be put within Horizon 2020 or another scheme like it, a semi-competitive scheme, like the band within Horizon 2020 called Widening Participation, which allows pairing between East and West so that we can transfer skills to them better. That's good for them because it puts them in contact with us and the networks and gets them up to speed on the best practices, but it's good for us because it trains us up on how to deliver best practices, and that's a global marketable service that we then have. So it's a big win-win waiting to happen. Then there's the European Innovation Council, which is coming along, and it's a copy of the European Research Council, which the Brits have been very good at pushing through initially, and now it's a massive success. We're thinking we can do the same thing with innovation. That in itself is an innovative idea and pretty much has the backing of everyone. And then the EU has made lots of moves recently, like led by the Dutch, to invest more and more in open science. So not just open access, which the Brits had a major voice and helped pushing through, but that's also open data. And it looks like some 2 billion is now going to be channeled in to open data, which is perfect. This is the area in science that we need to tackle most, open research data. This opens up a whole new field of science, which isn't just collecting and analysing data yourself, but mapping the whole pool of information that we have out there and capitalising on that. And the EU is the best place in the world to do that because we've got the world's largest single market, the world's largest research base, the world's largest pool of researchers, all democratically agreeing on what should be shared standards. And so when you've got 28 countries agreeing on what should be standards, they then become global standards quite quickly. So we have the power, the size and the growth to actually be world leading in how you handle the next phase of science, which is open research data. So these are all things that the UK could grab by the horns and bring to the EU if we vote to remain, if we stay in control of the policy, and then deliver an exciting package next year when we take the rotating presidency. And that's the difference here, people. You know, if you're looking at Brexit and you're looking at remaining, the difference in opportunities that we have is absolutely colossal. Brexit is just running around, putting out fires, taking a big step back and then renegotiating relationships and breaking it for them slightly and breaking it for us hugely. Whereas remaining is seizing on all of the momentum that is happening in European research and innovation at the moment and staying at the helm of that. And that is good for us, and that's good for our continent, and that's good for the world ultimately. That's why it is a no-brainer for those scientists who actually work with the EU and see where it's going on the cutting edge of our economy, which is the science, the research and innovation which delivers health, environmental protections, innovation, jobs and growth. That's where it's at, people, and that's why Remain is the exciting option.